Hello. Okay. You guys have been waiting and wondering when Neal was going to join us, Neal Katyal. Obviously, big news. Hi, everyone. Donald Trump was indicted today by a grand jury in Manhattan. Alvin Bragg is the district attorney. He was running things. Hi, Neal.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm really happy to see you, and I know everybody else is very happy to see you as well. I haven't talked to you in a while.
I know it has been a
Um,
while, so it's good to see your
I know
face.
you were traveling, but a lot was going on when you were up in the air, Neal.
Yeah, did I miss anything? I don't know.
Did you hear the news? So, everyone's breathless. A big historic event. Donald Trump was indicted, as you know. They're saying it's for 30 charges, speculation, or some sources. This is what I heard John Miller say on CNN, 30 charges of affiliated, I guess, with bank fraud. And gosh, let's just kind of unpack it, shall we?
Sure.
So,
Where would you?
Neal,
So,
obviously this is historic, but I'm curious, how big a deal is this?
it's a very big deal. The United States has had, a bunch of presidents, 46. We've never had a former president indicted. An indictment means a formal criminal accusation, not just someone say so. It's not me saying so, or even an attorney general saying so, or a district attorney. It's a grand jury of one's peers. Donald Trump lived in New York when all this happened, acted this way. And it's a New York grand jury that said, yes, there's probable cause. That means it's very likely that Donald Trump committed these crimes. Now, we don't know exactly what those crimes are yet, Katie, because the indictment is still under seal.
Right.
And Trump is going to, come to New York on Tuesday, face those charges, and then we'll all know exactly what they are. Right now, all we're hearing is rampant speculation, 30 charges, two charges, this, that, or the other. I don't know, and I think we should just wait and see. I'd also say like one kind of, I think, real important note, because I do see people, since I've landed gloating about this. And, the criminal process is always ugly, sad, horrific. I have the privilege of defending pro bono a bunch of criminal defendants, and it's always heartbreaking. And this is heartbreaking. I mean, this is not like some moment for us to be, joyously dancing. This is really serious stuff. We're talking about our former leader, being formally accused of committing crimes. And he's entitled to the presumption of innocence. I hope he has great attorneys that defend him in this. And I just hope the truth and the right thing is done at the end of the day. But what this means today is the formal criminal process kicks off. Trump is going to be arraigned. There's an asterisk about DeSantis, which we can talk about in a
Right,
moment.
right.
But he's going to be arraigned. He's going to, face a criminal trial with potentially jail time on the line.
This is sort of fascinating. I mean, there's so much I want to ask you about, but when you talk about the arraignment, when he comes to New York City, and I think the DeSantis thing is a lot of posturing. We will cover that in a moment, but it's certainly not kind of the headline. Is what will happen to Donald Trump? He'll go into he'll get arraigned, he'll get fingerprinted, they'll do a mug shot. Just tell us sort of what he's going to face.
Yeah. So even before he walks into the court, he's got to surrender to the district attorney's office. And every time I've ever heard of or seen, that's a person in handcuffs. Now, sometimes the handcuffs can be in front of a person as opposed to behind their back, but I've literally never seen a circumstance in which the person is not handcuffed. That is standard operating
Do you think
procedure.
they'll do
I do think
that?
I think that they will. If you're law enforcement, once you start making exceptions for one person, why not another, and so on. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if that's what happens. That's going to be quite a startling image for Americans, for the
Well, I
world
have a question.
to
Will
see.
that be done publicly? Will there be like a perp walk?
Well, there may not be a perp walk, and it may be that there's a way to just, get him into the court building in handcuffs, in a vehicle, so that nobody sees it. I guess that's certainly possible. You also never know with Trump whether he gets out of the car and does the walk himself. So but it's certainly possible. I suppose it's possible for him to come in that way. So he's then going to go before the judge, and they're going to ask how you plead, guilty or not guilty, and so on. There, I don't think is the possibility of pretrial detention. That means that Trump will go free at the end of the arraignment. We don't know exactly what the charges are, but so far none of them suggest to me that this is some kind of charge in which it's, so you're worried about a violent offender or something who might flee and therefore has to be, detained before a trial. That's a really rare thing in America for all sorts of great reasons.
So he'll be released on his own reconnaissance or whatever.
Recognizance, exactly. ROR is the term. And so I think that's what we would likely expect to see. And then there's a question of how fast this trial will happen. And sometimes defendants want to go fast because they think that the prosecution's not ready and they just, want to, blitzkrieg them. Here, the prosecution's been investigating this thing for years. So I expect it to be the reverse, that Trump will try and delay things as much as possible.
Well, I think most of this is my understanding. This investigation centers around the $130,000 payment, a violation of, I guess, campaign finance laws to Stormy Daniels, so she would not talk before the election. Are there other considerations that you know of that might have been part of this investigation in addition to that payment to Stormy Daniels? And by the way, if anyone has questions, feel free to ask them. I took the comments off so we could see your pretty face, Neal.
So I think that the way this is unfolds is first that and again, we're all kind of reading tea leaves here, but the district attorney first, I think, has a charge for falsifying business records. That is a bread and butter charge in New York law. The prosecutor's office does it all the time. And, that's a misdemeanor. So that means a lower crime. In order to make it a felony, yes, something like you had to falsify business records with the purpose of a campaign finance violation, or perhaps you falsified these business records and then got a tax deduction for them, because paying off and paying hush money to someone you had an affair with, there's no law against that per se, but there is a law about falsifying those records and trying to deduct them as business expenses. So either of those are probably at play, maybe both of those are at play in the sealed indictment. And then there could be other things too about the obstruction of the investigation and the like. We just don't know at this point very much. And that's why, it's fine for us all to speculate about the range of possibilities, but that's all we're doing at this point.
I think a lot of people are wondering, of all the cases against Donald Trump, of all the investigations, that this is obviously, I've been watching cable TV all night and kind of listening to all the pundits, speculate about this, but that this may be the weakest case against Donald Trump when you compare it to the Justice Department investigation, when you compare it to what he did in Georgia. What are your feelings on that, Neal?
Right. So it depends what you mean by weak. There are 4 criminal investigations going on. This one in New York, which looks like it revolves around hush money payments. Second, an investigation into Georgia and the 2020 election and Trump saying, find me 11,780 votes. And then 2 federal investigations, both done by special counsel Jack Smith. One about January 6th and Trump's role, the other about the stolen documents that Trump took to Mar-a-Lago from the White House. Okay, now, in terms of the gravity of the charges, Katie, if that's what you mean by weak, obviously these New York charges aren't like fomenting an insurrection or trying to steal an election or endangering our national security. They're of a weaker moment. They have been investigated a lot longer because the crimes took place a lot longer ago. And so it's reasonable to think that that would be the first indictment to be brought. Now, these 3 different prosecutors, New York, Georgia, and Jack Smith at the federal level, are probably not coordinating because they're different investigations. Right. They don't have anything to do with one another. And prosecutors have a general time-tailed rule, which is you bring an indictment when it's ready, and you don't think about necessarily other considerations. And so it seems to me all I read into this is the indictment's ready. Now, it could be each one of the three prosecutors was kind of looking over their shoulder to be like, who's going to go first?
Mm-hmm.
And it may be that now that the Rubicon has been crossed, that for the first time we have a former president who's been indicted, it may make it easier for those other two prosecutors to bring charges. But, that's
every time we talk, I know you say, yo, it's going to be in a month or so. And no offense, Neal, but you haven't been exactly right on the timing of some of these things.
I don't know that I predicted timing very much, except maybe Mar-a-Lago.
You would say things like very soon,
yeah. Well, Mar-a-Lago, I think, was a pretty simple investigation, and it would have been, and I think any Justice Department would have indicted it pretty quickly, except for the fact that, lo and behold, Joe Biden and Mike Pence happened to have a document or two as well. Now, that's not the gravity of those offenses. It's more about obstruction, but nonetheless, that's a, fly in the wheel of that prosecution.
And in fact, Neal, a couple of people have brought up that has significantly weakened the Mar-a-Lago case. Or, do you agree with that or not necessarily?
No, it's just a public perception, because Trump tries to smush everything together. There's no accusation that Joe Biden, told his attorney to lie, or that Joe Biden or Mike Pence refused to, let searches happen, and the like. So,
right.
There was no need to, to go and raid these two government officers' homes because they cooperated from the start. Trump did the reverse.
I was watching Mike Pence being interviewed tonight by Wolf Blitzer, and he said this shows there's a two-tiered justice system, which honestly, I didn't understand the reasoning of that. If anything, it shows that it's not two-tier to me. But he said he wished the Manhattan DA had thought better of it. And he said that being indicted on campaign finance smacks of political prosecution. Of course, that's what you're hearing. Many Republicans, Fox News people saying this is, a witch hunt. And that's something that Donald Trump himself has said on the campaign trail in Waco most recently. And that, he's being unfairly pursued and there's a double standard for him. I know you don't agree with that, but I just thought I'd let you respond to that defense.
Yeah, I guess I didn't listen to Pence, but I would say that the double standard has always worked, in my mind, in the reverse way, which is Trump has acted all along like he's above the rule of law. And today, the district attorney's action by indicting Trump finally drags him down to the same level as the rest of us. And maybe the vice president knows all the evidence that this district attorney has and, thinks it's all made up. That's great if he has that information. I don't. I haven't seen it one way or the other. So I think what we should do is do what it would be if it were you or me. Our founders gave us a magnificent criminal justice system with innocent till proven guilty. You got to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, have to be indicted by a grand jury of your peers, which Trump was today, and ultimately a jury trial in which the prosecution has to run the table, Katie. 12 jurors, the prosecution has to get every single one to agree that Donald Trump committed these crimes. And so that's the process. I know for years Trump has been able to get out of it by, all sorts of machinations, but this is the process you or I would face if we did this. There's no chance that if we falsified these business records and, as part of our presidential campaign or tried to write them off for tax reasons, that we would be, sitting here having this conversation on Instagram, because you ain't allowed Instagram in jail.
What about this notion that a grand jury would indict a ham sandwich? That's something, of course, you hear in legal circles a lot. Could that be the case here?
Well, certainly grand juries, do have a lower standard than the ultimate jury, which Trump will get. He'll get these 12 jurors who decide with a really high standard of beyond a reasonable doubt whether he's guilty. So the grand jury standard is intentionally lower for a really good reason. Our founders wanted these cases to be in the system and not truncated through kind of sweetheart deals beforehand. Akin to what, for example, Bill Barr did with the Trump investigation.
Right.
So, that's one thing. I think the other really important thing is when you hear witch hunt, when you hear political prosecution and all of that, remember that the Justice Department, the federal Justice Department, already concluded that this whole set of activities of hush money was a crime. They said so in 2018, in a written memo, and they put someone in jail for these very things. His name was Michael Cohen. He was Donald Trump's lawyer. And when the Justice Department said that Michael Cohen committed these felonies, they said Cohen did so at the direction of Donald Trump, and that this was not a legitimate expense, that this was hush money. Now, that was not the Merrick Garland Justice Department. That was not the Barack Obama Justice Department. That was the Donald Trump Justice Department that said that in 2018. So a little hard for him to say what he's saying now about political prosecution when it was his Justice Department that used that very same underlying conduct, called it a felony, and said Trump was responsible for it.
If you were Donald Trump's lawyer, how would you deal with these charges? Or, impending charges? They don't know what they are yet, but.
2 words, it looks like plea bargain. I mean, it's, I would fall on my sword and say, yeah, I messed up here, and hope for the best. Again, I haven't seen the evidence, but my gut is, and this goes back to your grand jury question about grand juries ordinarily indicting, that may be true in general. It's not true when you're talking about the former president of the United States. It's not true that a prosecutor's going to do this. This is not something that a prosecutor salivates over, or a grand jury. This is really serious and indeed heartbreaking stuff. And I don't care where you sit politically. This isn't a place that our country was meant to be. At the same time, when you look at countries around the world in which leaders have committed bad things, those leaders go to jail. And that is essential, maybe the most important thing our founders left us with. It starts with the 1780 Constitution of Massachusetts. It's laced into our 1787 Constitution. We are a government of laws and not of men.
Hey, I'm going to look through, we've gotten 63 questions, so I'm going to look through some of them, but I want to ask you a couple questions while I kind of look through what our viewers are asking. So this Ron DeSantis comment you mentioned earlier, he said the weaponization of the legal system to advance a political agenda turns the rule of law on its head. It is un-American. The Soros-backed Manhattan DA has consistently bent the law to downgrade felonies and to excuse criminal misconduct, yet now he's stretching the law to target a political appointment. Florida will not assist in an extradition request given the questionable circumstances at issue with his Soros-backed, not twice, Manhattan prosecutor and his political agenda. What do you make of this? Is this a purely a way to appease sort of MAGA land in your view and to keep those people close for his own political aspirations? I mean, why is he saying that? And can he really keep somebody from being extradited?
No. Lord knows why he's saying it. I could never get into that guy's head if you paid me $1 million. But in terms of what he's saying, it is, to use the technical legal term us law professors use, cockamamie. It is ridiculous. So the Constitution itself says that when one state indicts someone and that person is in another state, that other state's under an obligation to turn that person over. There's no discretion. There's a law passed by Congress in 1793 that says the same thing. And there's a United States Supreme Court decision from 1987 that says the same thing. He has literally nothing on his side. And this is hilarious to me for someone who proclaims to be all about studying the Constitution and this and that. It's right in there, black and white. There's no chance in the world that DeSantis could stop Donald Trump's extradition if that's what happened. Now, Trump is saying, I'm actually going to voluntarily turn myself in. I'll, of course, believe it when I see it, but if he doesn't, this is the way that the process is going to unfold. DeSantis will try and block it. New York will go to court and in a matter of hours be able to enforce it. There's no argument that DeSantis has.
I don't think Trump would want DeSantis to help him out anyway, but this is a very interesting question, and I was going to ask this, so I appreciate the viewer who posed this question as the first one. I was looking this up earlier, Neal. The question is it true there's nothing in the Constitution to prevent a convicted felon from running for president? So I looked that up and I said, if Donald Trump is convicted, could he still run for president? And it basically said yes. I'm like, what?
Well, there's nothing in the text of the Constitution per se. There are various crimes that say once you've been convicted, like seditious conspiracy, then you can't run for office. So there are specific crimes that say that. I think many constitutional scholars think that the right to vote is the relevant piece of text. And in general, you don't have a right to vote if you're in jail or you're a convicted felon. And so if you don't have the right to vote, you don't have the right to be voted for, is the way the argument would go. So I think that it's certainly not squarely in the text of the Constitution, but lots of things aren't squarely in the text of the Constitution, but we have implied them.
Okay. All right. Well, that clarifies it. And I guess some of those things would fall in the category of the things that you said that would prohibit him from running. But
yeah, so basically, Katie, just to be very clear about my answer, I think if he is serving a criminal sentence, I don't think that he could run for office or be elected at that moment. If he's done his time, served his sentence, and there isn't some sort of disenfranchisement law in the relevant state in which he is, then his rights could be restored at that point.
Someone asked, does this also mean that Stormy is guilty of blackmail? That's sort of interesting.
I don't think so. It could, it certainly, it depends on how everything was phrased and what it was. So it's certainly a possibility, and it might be that her attorneys negotiated in order for her to tell the truth about what happened, that she get some sort of immunity. Those are all things that will come up in the criminal trial, as well as Michael Cohen's credibility.
Yeah. Somebody said, can we expect to see accountability for Ivanka, Eric, and Don Jr.? People have been asking about that. Could any of the kids be implicated, and even Melania? Is that hard to say?
Again, I just caution everyone not to be, so exuberant about this. This is really horrific stuff. And it might be because some of those folks were involved in the Trump organization, and the Trump organization may have been involved directly in the payments, and there might be knowledge. It might be that they get swept up in it, but time will tell. Those are separate pieces of the investigation.
Yeah. Someone said, will Brad follow the grand jury vote? I don't know what that means exactly. Do you, Neal?
No.
Someone said, will we see him handcuffed? Does he think, could Trump have appeared before the grand jury?
Yes, he was invited to appear before the grand jury, and he said no.
Should he have appeared in your view?
If I were advising him, and I certainly wouldn't be advising him for a million reasons, but if I were, for some reason, I lost some really big bet or something, I would advise him not to appear. He has a difficult relationship to the truth, to put it mildly, and you don't want to compound the criminal jeopardy you're in by lying to a grand jury.
Someone asked, how much is the maximum prison term for this? I think we can't answer that question because we don't know what the charges are.
Correct.
I'm trying to think. Anything else that you think is important for people?
Yeah, just one last thing. I think it's important that people realize this is a New York state prosecution and not a federal one like the one Jack Smith is investigating. And that has a couple of implications. I mean, one is it's the first time that Trump's going to face a jury of peers and not have some backroom deal with an attorney general like Bill Barr to kill an investigation, which is what happened the last time around. It also means that if a Republican president wins in 2024, that doesn't undo this criminal prosecution because it's at the state level, and the pardon clause in the United States Constitution is limited only to federal offenses. And so,
yeah, someone says, will a potential indictment from Georgia for election interference carry more weight? What you're saying is they all can happen concurrently, correct?
Absolutely, and that will be very hard for Trump to defend against multiple criminal indictments in different jurisdictions at the same time.
Someone asked, can we be hopeful that this will be the end of his political future? Um, that's hard to say. I mean, I really talked to you about the legal particular, the legal specifics and ramifications and not the political ramifications. But, there are people who believe that this will help Donald Trump solidify his base and kind of reconnect with the politics of grievance and sort of a persecution complex, I guess a prosecution complex in this case. So, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot and ask you about the political impact of this, but have you thought that it might weirdly be helpful to him?
Well, I don't know that my views on this, because I'm no political person, are very helpful, but I would point you to a political expert, a guy named Donald Trump, who said repeatedly that an indictment would help him. And so, he's talking out of both sides of his mouth. He's saying an indictment will help him, but then he's saying the New York prosecutor is acting politically. I mean, I guess if he's acting politically, it's to help Donald Trump, according to one Donald Trump who's saying that. So, I just think these cases, the prosecutors in all three of these cases, or all four of these cases, the three prosecutors, I think have one mission, which is just simply follow the law, look to comparable cases, ask yourself if this was anyone else, what would we be doing? That is the only thing they should be doing. They shouldn't be doing it to try and knock out a presidential candidate or to help a presidential candidate. It's about one thing and one thing only, the rule of law.
Which is ideal, but I mean, it's my understanding Alvin Bragg is elected, right, Neal? And he
Correct.
talked about Trump, I guess, during his campaign. And, you know, could he have political motivations as an elected DA? I mean, is some of that criticism warranted?
So our founders definitely anticipated that prosecutors could have political or nefarious reasons, corruption or something like that. 100%. That's the whole system is based on that fear. And that's why you have not, government officials deciding whether someone should go to jail. It's a jury of 12 peers who are unconnected to the government, unconnected to the participants in the case. And all 12 of them have to agree, and not just agree like more likely than not, but beyond a reasonable doubt, the highest standard in the law. And so that's the way in which our system deals with it, not through kind of truncating the case at the get-go because we're worried that there might be a political motivation. Prove it up. If Trump thinks it's a political motivation, he's got a whole criminal trial to prove it.
Can I ask you one dumb question before we leave and before I pass out because I'm so tired and you're probably exhausted, Neal? How many people are on a grand jury?
In New York, it's 23.
23.
Yeah.
And does it have to be unanimous to indict him?
I don't believe so. That depends state to state, and I think
Majority,
it's 16.
we think, yeah.
I think it's 16 in New York, but I can't remember for sure.
I can't believe it, ladies and gentlemen. I stumped Neal Katyal.
You did.
12? 12 out of 23?
So maybe it's the quorum of 16 out of 23. Maybe 16 have to be there to hear the evidence, and it's 12. But I know 16 has some role to play as well. But sorry, you got me.
That's okay. Neal, great to see you. Hey, everyone, thanks for watching. I feel like Neal is so great at explaining this stuff and not talking down to us, but also making it accessible. So, Neal, as always, thanks a lot. And, we'll probably, whenever you're available, we'll be probably talking about the outcome of some of these other investigations in the not too distant future. We'll see.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, good to see
All
you.
right.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, Neal. Bye, everybody. Good night.